there was a new interview that appeared on a Korean website with the PD for Chaos Zero Nightmare. I'm not going to butcher his name, but this interview is really long. It goes really in depth too. I was surprised at how much they covered. They covered pretty much every single thought that I had about the playtest. Some of the ones that I even forgot that I had, and I read it and I was like, oh, I remember this. So I think this is a really, really nice interview. This is Korean translated to English, just using like the translation on the browser. So I'm not going to read everything word for word since it's not necessarily fluent English, but we can get the general gist of it, and let's get into it. To start, we're going to skip this. This is just them talking about how well the playtest went. And here, this section, we also covered this too before. They're talking about the inconsistencies in the card designs. I put up a video about this, about people accusing them of using AI and everything, but there's definitely evidence of them having changed designs a ton throughout the development of this game. And some of the cards just had old designs left on them, which needed to be changed, and they're going to make sure that all of these issues will be polished for the official release of the game on the 22nd. Now they're talking about some stuff in the playtest, which is just some people felt a little bit like underwhelmed by the actual deck building part. So we have our 3 characters and everything, but what like we get to do with them, some people felt a bit let down. He's mainly just saying that in the playtest we played for 4 days. Nobody made it to level 40 from what I know. So there's a lot of the game that just hasn't been shown yet. And because part of the playtest was introducing the like game to people, and he didn't want people to just have a big gap from people who are like playing the genre for the first time versus more experienced players, they did limit some of the stuff that we had in the playtest. So there's a lot more to the deck building that we just haven't seen yet, which makes sense. In the playtest, we didn't have access to gear, and we didn't have access to the Zero system either, and probably some other stuff. So definitely there's a lot more for us to see once the game actually releases. And this is just talking about save data, and save data was honestly really unsatisfying in the playtest, but I think this was due to our low level. Your save data has a cap. I'm not sure how high this cap goes. I really hope that at the highest level, this cap is effectively removed, because when you pass the cap, you start losing things from your save data. So it was kind of annoying to like do a run and then just not have everything that I had during that run. I would assume this issue gets fixed once you reach higher levels, and I sure hope that it does. As for what you do with the save data, pretty much you just use it in other places, like when you're farming, or I guess gear enhancement materials, or doing some of the battle missions next to the story. That kind of stuff all uses your save data. There might be some more content that uses save data probably once the game actually comes out that we didn't have access to in the playtest. And you can save different builds too. Like you could literally save builds on characters that are dedicated for farming and clearing it faster, because if you're just doing farming stages, you don't need a healer. You can just run triple DPS, and there's probably certain setups you could do. Like even, I think just like a basic one that I had was I had a run where I picked up like 2 innate cards that just instantly let you AoE, and that would wipe out a couple of waves. That sort of thing. So there's definitely a lot of room for us to play around with the save data. And he's talking a bit about how the combinations for our team building has 3 different characters, with each character having their own cards. It heavily influences what your sort of team is going to look like depending on which characters you pick, and there's going to be a lot of different combinations for us to work with. One more thing is that I definitely felt this in the playtest, the lack of a way to sort of test characters, especially with characters changing so much after you unlock their potentials. Potential Node 3.1 had some pretty major effects for some characters, and with the weekly map drop that we had in the playtest, you got 3 per account. So I didn't get to test a lot of characters because of that, and they're talking about potentially adding a sort of guide that shows combinations and like how to use them and stuff. An event/tutorial stage. Epic 7 got this pretty recently. It would be nice to have it here as well, just to familiarize ourselves with new characters and also even just existing ones after we roll them. I mentioned that we didn't have access to the Zero system. This is right next to Chaos mode, which we did have access to and was the pretty much endgame mode in the playtest. So here in the Zero system, they're saying it's more roguelike content, and you can get a bunch of rewards from it. It drops Zeronium, I'm pretty sure, because we had a currency called Zeronium, which we couldn't get anywhere, and I would expect the Zeronium to drop from Zero system. You can adjust the difficulty level, and there's going to be a bunch of different things you can do. There's various chaoses and stages without restrictions, whatnot. From what I've seen, they have like modifiers on the stages for you to do when you do your runs. And the reward shop looked like there was a lot of stuff in there, like pretty important stuff. I think this might be one of the most important pieces of content in the game, just in terms of the rewards that you get for clearing it. So we have a chaos mode plus a Zero system, and is there a nightmare mode? This one, I honestly can barely understand what is being said here, but he mentions that a lot of the people, and this was a complaint that I saw pretty frequently, a lot of people were sort of let down by the level of horror that was showed in the game. Even compared to what we saw in the trailers, it felt like the playtest had a little bit less than that. And he mentioned that a lot of the stuff was blocked in the playtest that we did, but it'll be available once the game releases. And as for Nightmare mode, it's just a mode that enhances the production. I don't know exactly what this means, but I can't tell if this is like a toggle that just makes the horror stuff like more emphasized or something, or if it's like an actual mode, because we didn't have any actual modes listed there and there's been no info about an actual mode. We'll see what this is, but definitely it would be nice to have more of that sort of direction that the game was kind of marketing itself with, I guess, when during like all of the early stuff. And you can see Zero System on the right here. And this is another thing that I saw people complaining about, the story, because you have all this stuff about like the needing to go into the chaos, and there was a lot of like talk about like character deaths. And after the prologue was good. The prologue had like somebody die, not like a permanent death because they have the life things or whatever, but like there was a good sense of tension from the prologue, and then after that it kind of really fizzled out until the last couple of chapters where we got left off. There was like a large gap where it just kind of felt like everything was like kind of just going, and a lot of the places, like Arc City, our ship has this big city which felt like super easygoing. So a lot of people complaining about just the general vibe of the game. And he says that's kind of intentional. Like there's going to be somewhere where people are happy and it's going to contrast all of the horrifying stuff that's out there. So we definitely haven't experienced everything that the game has, because we only saw like 2.5 chapters pretty much of the story. There's definitely a lot left to see. And then here he says you'll see the really hardcore direction of the game after the game officially releases. So I'm excited to see. I did actually read the whole story when we had the playtest. And he's talking something about Macross and songs here, but not sure exactly. I'd never watched Macross. And then no robots, unfortunately. So there is one robot partner card. So now for the BM, which is this stands for business model. This is a complaint that you'll see a ton, just people complaining about the gacha system in the game, because this game's pretty much a Hoyo clone in terms of its systems. There's the 50-50 scaling soft pity, you got everything, and they don't really say they're going to change it, but they talk about how they're going to at least uh, communicate with us and stuff. We know that there is going to be a dev talk coming up in early October, which should be covering this topic as well. And they want it to be a free game in principle, which they've mentioned this before too. They want the game to be relatively generous. E7 is definitely on the more generous end, and they want people to be able to get a lot of the major characters that they want. Based on other games, I would expect to be able to get like every other character or so. Depends if you go for the partners or not. We'll see what level they want to aim for. And then the mine I think they're talking about is just when you start up a game, there's a lot of one-time rewards that you can get for like story completion, achievements, that sort of thing. And what does the income look like once you've cleared out all of the introductory stuff? And they address this and say that they're aiming to just keep up the flow to a decent level. I wouldn't expect it to be like the exact same as launch. Launch is always a little bit better, but to at least make it good. So here's one more thing that we didn't have available in the playtest, which was the trauma code. This was right next to the therapy area, and it was blocked off. But from what we know from the story, if I read that correctly, the trauma codes pretty much show us parts of the characters' pasts. So we'll have a lot of things to learn about the characters once we actually get to unlock the trauma codes. He mentions that specifically Renoa didn't have like too much of her character shown in the playtest, but through the trauma code we'll be able to find out a lot more about her, which makes sense because a lot of Renoa's thing is that she likes us a lot, but we have no idea why. And I'd expect that we'd be able to find out a lot more about it through the trauma code and just more about who she was in the past, because she's got a really cool name and her current personality doesn't necessarily reflect it. The character nerfs, this is a big thing. I was never expecting character nerfs just because anyone who's played Epic 7 knows that every single time they nerf a character, everybody riots. So at this point, they just give out a ton of stuff every time they nerf a character. You just straight up get a selector, you get to pick another character to use. It's pretty insane, and I think this honestly makes them not want to nerf things at all because they have to give out so much stuff. So here they mentioned that they won't be nerfing characters after the game releases, uh, because there's like it's a roguelike style game. They're saying that the sort of difficulty inflation is going to be harder to happen, which I really hope is the case because that's always one of the most worrying things about gacha games, right? What is the sort of power creep going to look like as more characters release? They also mentioned something really important here. In the playtest, shielding was absurd. It was absurdly strong because the only content that we had was chaos mode, and the way that stress stacks up is if you block all of the damage, then you get no stress. If you take the damage, then you get a ton of stress, and healing it only reduces the stress by a little bit. So the best way to play chaos mode was to just shield everything. Block all the damage so you don't get stressed. But in later combat, they say that it'll be diversified in the way that monsters must be effective, do not appear. I don't know what that means, but basically there should be other ways for us to play besides just shield everything and block all the stress. And they're gonna try to make it so that the one like specific style isn't just completely dominating, which is nice because I was definitely worried about like team building restrictions where there's the character Luke who needs Lucas, and if you have 2 DPS and you have to run a shielder, it's like, yeah. So hopefully that stuff gets, or once we're able to unlock more of the content, we'll be able to have more flexibility with our team building. And this section is just talking about the character nerf stuff. Skins. So they mentioned that they're not going to be doing skins. just because there's too much stuff that goes into each character, really, which makes sense. You have trauma, you have like the therapy sessions with the trauma, you have like their cards, and then all of like the different card arts. They're basically saying there's too much to do, which kind of happens in E7 too, because in E7 they have to redraw the S3 every time they do a skin. So I have to understand why they're not doing skins. They do say that there's a system that can show different aspects of the character being prepared, but not full character skins. Not Moonlight Heroes either. They're gonna tell us more about the details for this, I guess, different aspects of the characters being shown later on. Also, during the playtest, keyboard controls pretty much did not work. There was no point. Like, escape didn't move you back. We have keybinds on the PC client for Epic 7 that let us select like important keys, which didn't work here. Like here, it would be nice if I could like press like 1, 2, 3 and select the options here, that sort of thing, or like something to enter combat, escape to open the menu, that sort of thing. None of that worked, so hopefully that will get updated for the actual official release of the game. And then this is talking about the season system. I'm not sure how many people are familiar with this, but basically they've mentioned that the way they want their content to come out is on a season-based schedule. And in each season, there'll be a bunch of new stuff. New scenarios leading to meta changes and that sort of stuff. It'll be about 9 weeks long per season. We'll have weekly updates, and in each season, there will be new chaos, new cards. The cards are going to completely swap out. Not like every single character's cards, but like the neutral cards they've mentioned will swap out a bit. And then there's new boss raid battles, zero system updates, and then the gacha banners are on a 3-week basis. After the season opens, there will be a bit of a preview. I think let's talk about the start of the game, have a preview season, and then the first season will start the 3rd week after the game starts. And then here is pretty much ending it off. Definitely, I think this interview was nice, even if it's not necessarily in the most legible English. They definitely addressed a lot. Like, there were a lot of things that I forgot about. Like, I forgot the keyboard just didn't work in the playtest. So it's definitely nice seeing that they had, like, addressed and are aware of pretty much all of the major issues that I had during the playtest. We still have that dev talk coming up. We'll see what happens during that. But for now, I'll put this in the description if anybody wants to translate this and read through it themselves.